So there I am in Minneapolis, in a hotel. I'm on assignment doing some work for General Mills, helping them invent a new snack food that was going to make $250 million a year. That was their goal, and that was my mission. I was going to be running a brainstorming session, an ideation session with their product developers the following day to see if they could come up with some breakthrough ideas that would lead to $250 million in revenues. If it was $200 million, it was a failure. It had to be $250 million. Okay, game on. So I wake up in the morning, I go downstairs, I get my USA Today at the marble counter of the very fancy hotel, and I get in the taxi cab, and I get in the back seat, and I realize I have three choices. I can look at my notes for the meeting, I can read the USA Today, or I can take a brief nap while my driver gets me to the General Mills headquarters. So I glance forward, I look at the dashboard, and I notice the name and the face, the license, if you will, of the cab driver on the dashboard, and it's obvious he's not from America. He's from another country. Do I talk with him? Do I read my paper? Do I chit-chat? What do? I was in a social mood, so I said to him quite simply, "Where are you from?" And there was a silence, and he said, "I'm from Afghanistan." Now, this was in the middle of that war, the Afghanistan war. And I am in the back seat being driven by a man from Afghanistan who might have, let's say, checkered impressions of Americans. And I have to decide, do I continue the conversation or not? I continue the conversation and I ask him, "How was it that you moved to America?" And he said, well, there it was in the middle of the war, and he and his daughter are out walking outside of his village when his daughter steps on a landmine. And her leg was mangled quite horribly. And he rips his shirt off, he tells me, makes a tourniquet around his daughter's leg, and goes maniacally in search of medical help. His daughter is bleeding to death. But guess what? All the doctors are gone. They have vacated the area many months ago. That area was totally in havoc, and there was no medical help. He wandered from village to village with his daughter fading in and out of consciousness on his back, looking for help. And he would get to a town, he would get to a tent, he would get to a hut, and they would apply the ointments and the salves of the local herbs to try to help, but she was so far beyond just the local remedies. He needed serious help. Somebody tells him that down the road was a clinic from the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis that had nurses there who were attending to a lot of the people who were victims of the various war horrendous things happening, and he got to them, and they took the daughter and they treated her in an emergency way, and they saved her life, and they flew her the next day to the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis, and then they flew him and his wife 2 days later to join with their daughter in Minneapolis, where they stayed for a year while she was undergoing several surgeries and being fitted for a prosthetic device, and after a year of therapy, they decided to emigrate to the US, and he's now my cab driver. At about that moment, we arrive at General Mills headquarters, and I am stunned, I am speechless. This is all going on in a cab for me to get ready to facilitate a brainstorming session on how a big American corporation can make more salty snack food. So you see the worlds collide kind of thing that I'm in. I get out of the cab, he gets out of the cab, I pay him, we hug each other. I walk into the lobby, I'm greeted, I get my security pass, I go upstairs, I enter the room, I set up, And into the room walks a bunch of 30-somethings with their Blackberries and their smartphones and their coffee and their muffins. And I am at a crossroads. How do I start this session? Do I forget the ride to headquarters as some kind of surreal preamble to the day that has nothing to do with life? Or do I begin the day by retelling the story of my cab ride? I had a choice to make. Who am I? How true will I be? And I chose the path of retelling that story of my cab ride. An odd, curious thing happened to me, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, on my way to this brainstorming session. And I told the story, not knowing what their response would be. It was a risk. They were stunned and they were silenced, and I could see them, I could feel them leaving that kind of chit-chat, hyper-caffeinated, superficial mode and really drop into who they were as human beings. That story landed for them. And it changed the whole tenor, the whole tonality of the day. I told the story, I segued to the rest of the session. The session was productive, it was useful, but I began by speaking the truth. I began by saying something that was risky to say, but it changed the game. And I'm encouraging all of my clients and all of my friends, and I'm encouraging myself, when we have something that meaningful, that transformational, that mind-blowing, that's got such potential to change minds and open hearts, not to dismiss it, not to put it aside, not to think it's not part of business. It is. It's the business of life. You're in that business and I'm in that business. And when we speak from that place, our business will flourish, really flourish.